Hi, everyone. Let's give everybody 1 minute before we get started. Sri, do you want to come off mute? Mm.
Try again, Sri.
Yes, how about that?
Very good.
Perfect.
Okay, hi everyone. I was just trying to figure that out.
James, let's get started.
Okay, great. So first, I want to introduce the webinar that we're having today, Becoming an Analytics Change Agent. So thank you everyone for joining. It's really great seeing you all. And of course, my screen share is acting funky.
So the typical next slide is a quick introduction. So
Yeah.
I'll introduce myself. I'm Larry Cohen. I'm the SVP of Data Strategy for Enabler, and I'm privileged to have with me Sridharan. Sri, we want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Great to be here. My name is Sri. I'm a Senior Research Director at Forrester, and I manage our data analytics and insights research.
And Larry, okay, I'm going to the next slide. And so before we start this meeting, just let everybody know that this meeting is being recorded to stop any distractions from the speakers as we're going along. If you have any questions, please email them to info@enabler.com and we'll answer them as we get to them. And recording of this webinar will be made available within 3 business days after we close out today. So with that, let's move on. Stop sharing and bring our lovely faces on screen. Okay. All right. So to start things off, just wanted to start off this this fireside chat. You know, it's weird because I don't have any fire by me at the moment, but just wanted to get a quick update from you guys as far as I'm sorry, my screen is jumping around like crazy.
We see you. You're good, James.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so just a quick update or run through about this webinar today. Today's customers, analytics professionals, are no longer data practitioners that feed the marketing funnel. Now they provide insights across customer life cycle to stakeholders, including customer experience and product leaders. Customer insight pros use client analytics to extend value and become strategic business partners through our organizations. Every analyst has a responsibility beyond being a data plumber or report jockey. In the past, you had a career of certain level of status or influence to lead an organization, but times have changed. The attributes and profile required to lead an organization through data technology and analytics has evolved. Organizations can and should be led by data, despite the stats. It's neither mandatory to have the word analytics in your title, nor have the functional title at all to lead with analytics. It all comes down to knowing what it means to be an organizational change agent. And that is our topic for today's discussion. As I mentioned before, and you both introduced yourself, Larry and Sri. So just wanted to hand the conversation over to you and talk about your current roles and experiences, sharing interesting anecdotes with the attendees to get things started off.
Absolutely. So I can get started, Larry. So as I mentioned, currently I manage our data analytics and AI research team at Forrester. So it's more about writing about analytics versus doing the analytics, which has been a really fun job. And I guess fun anecdote would be I was never good at math, and I do not know how I ended up in a career in analytics. I always was aspiring to kind of be at the intersection of art and writing and analytics, and somehow ended up in this role. So yeah, curious to hear kind of your path, Larry, too, where I started out kind of as a marketing generalist and always found that I needed more confidence to influence the stakeholders that I was engaging with, and that confidence came from data. So then I gravitated more towards, okay, what does an intersection of marketing and analytics look like? And then the storytelling aspect of the communication of the data, of the insights, which again sort of led me into writing about the trends and the technologies. So that's been really an interesting journey. And yeah, curious to see how, Larry, how you came about in this career.
So it's a little bit of a full circle. I'd say my career started by collecting baseball cards and playing with the statistics. And then one day my father threw me a copy of the New York Times and said, they do this in real life. It's called the stock market. Go figure it out. And so I then started down a path wanting to go into finance. But my entire career, I've yet to work on Wall Street. I have yet to work in a financial role. But I think what excited me about applying statistical models was a corporate finance class, which was what is the statistical probability of hitting oil? And then being able to then start to apply that into this ever-growing field known as analytics. And so I've been in different industries, but my role has been pretty similar in that I'm using data, I'm applying statistical methodologies, and I'm helping organizations make business decisions and have a better probability of being successful.
Yep.
James, you're on mute.
Oh, how's that? Is that better?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, everyone. I am usually much better at this. But anyway, I just wanted to throw a couple of questions out to you both. So what actually brought you both into analytics, and what challenges do you encounter in your earlier career? And also, along with that, what was the turning point when things change, and what are you still trying to overcome? Basic questions I'm just kind of curious about.
Yeah, I think I touched upon this a little bit, where I felt like I was hitting a wall with getting initiatives out the door, because either things were always done the same way, and people just wanted to continue doing things the same way. And if I were to bring kind of an analytical or data-oriented solution, it was sometimes met with a bit of skepticism, right? We often say as analytics professionals, data speaks for itself, but actually it doesn't. We have to make the data speak and sing and dance and do all of these things to influence decisions. And it is not an intellectual kind of pursuit. So I think that spurred this interest in how can you use data and analytics to ultimately drive human decisions, right? There are humans who are making decisions based on the analytics, based on the dashboards, based on the machine learning models. So those are some of the earlier challenges. And I think where we are today is the good news, and I hope everybody on this call feels this way as analytics professionals. We don't have to sell the notion of being data-driven or being insights-driven as much as we did maybe 10 years ago. There's plenty of data to be analyzed. We're barely scratching the surface on what we could do with the power of data and analytics and AI. So I think it's not so much of a hard sell that this is important. Now the question is more about how do we do it? How do we do it right? What are the skills that are needed? What are the cross-functional skills? It's not about specialty type of skills anymore. So that would be kind of my thoughts on some of the challenges I encountered and where I think things are today.
So I'd say what got me into analytics is really about problem solving. I feel intellectually and emotionally satisfied solving really, really hard problems. And I joke that my ideal title is Chief Problem Solving Officer. So the fact that I can come in on a day-to-day basis, be thrown various challenges, either internally or externally, and be able to make order and organization out of chaos, I find incredibly satisfying professionally, and also really challenging. I know that I'm going to do something smart. I'm going to have a team that uses their brains in a way that they haven't really thought of before, and create new intellectual muscle out of what they do on a day-to-day basis. And so I find that analytics is incredibly rewarding, and then also seeing other people and other colleagues and teammates getting hooked on the value and excitement of solving problems in a new, interesting, and data-driven way.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned that, Larry. I think in that pursuit too, I do feel, at least this is based on what we hear from our Forrester clients, is analytics professionals, data professionals are sort of like the unsung heroes of the organization. We're quiet, we get the work done, and we dabble in all of the amazing new technologies and tools. But I think that barrier to kind of connecting that to business outcomes a little bit more, I think that's where we are right now, right? And it sounds like that's sort of what spurred you.
Yeah, that's great. And one of the things that we're touching on, so we're talking a lot about analytics and struggles and how overcoming those. But one of the things we're trying to focus on today is becoming a change agent. What actually is a change agent, and what actually falls into that? Would either one of you like to talk a bit more about that?
I'll go first.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think I would actually change the word from change into dollar bills. And so thanks, James. It's really about the connection to business outcomes tree that you were talking about. Analytics is driving results, and the more that we can bridge the gap in attribution from data, insight, activity, result, and being able to streamline that more, and the data is getting closer and closer together, the more we can create that relationship, and then be able to tell the story that this insight drove this this activity, this analysis that drove this action, that drove this this revenue, lead, whatever your business outcome is, sales and incidents, the more valuable the analytics practice becomes, the more valuable work that the analyst practitioner has the ability to do.
Absolutely agree, Larry. I think one dimension to that I'd like to go a little bit deeper when we say change agent is one of the analysts on my team uses this phrase a lot. It's the soft stuff is the hard stuff, right? And the soft stuff, as analytics professionals, we focus on the hard stuff, the problem solving, the technologies, the modeling, the algorithms. And the soft stuff is the change aspect of it, is the transformation aspect, is the showing that you actually drove results. And tooting our own horns that, guess what? We contributed so much to business results. So we've actually Forrester has done research on this exact concept of change agent personas, where we identify 3 types of personas. They're not new roles. Everybody within an analytics function can play one of these personas from a competency standpoint. And the 3 are kind of that evangelist, typically a leader of the team, trying to make sure others in the organization know what the team brings to the table and the results, that they can demonstrate. Then there's sort of the catalyst who, in a classic sense, they were called business analysts, right? They were the translators between the business and the data folks. And then you have the wranglers, the data wranglers. They're enabling self-service data access. They're building those dashboards. They're helping their firms with the data democratization journey. So these type of roles, or rather personas, anybody within an analytics and data organization can play those roles, but they focus on the softer aspect of your job, like building trust, building influence within the organization, showing results, storytelling, influencing executive, to get executive buy-in, getting more budget to hire more people, to buy more tools and things like that. So that would be sort of my take on, this concept of a change agent. Certainly driving the results, but also focusing on the human skills for the analytics professionals that we need to nurture.
And I would just build on that, Sri, that it's not just quantitative data as well, but also textual and contextual data, where it's not just around the quantitative models, it's also the presentation of it using words and inference that drives it all together.
Absolutely.
And I actually had a question. So what are the types of skills that someone would need to become a change agent, in your opinions? And also when answering that too, thinking about whether your organization is a large organization versus a small one. Do you have any examples of working with people to help them become change agents? Just wondering.
Yeah, so I touched upon this a little bit when I was describing those personas. Like, for instance, in the catalyst role, you need good consulting skills, right? You are trying to understand a problem and describe a problem to different stakeholders who speak a completely different language, and then do it the other way around as well, right? I mean, so you need sort of to build and nurture consulting skills in that catalyst persona. For an evangelist, it's really a lot about trust and resilience and influence and managing up, right? Like I mentioned about sharing your results, showing your work. A lot of the analytics work can be hidden from the stakeholders, right? You come to them with the end result and the end point, but often showing them how you got to the result is equally sort of valuable. So, putting things in place to show your work and to show, how you got to the result can build trust within the stakeholders. And then building expertise within the business domains that you're serving. If you're an analytics team, primarily aligned with marketing or customer experience or product organization, understanding like what are the goals and metrics that drive those business leaders, right? What are they on the hook for? And putting your work in their context. So these are some of those skills and competencies that are that we see are much needed within an analytics organization. So I think you asked James about a couple of examples, from our research that I mentioned. In one case, a large B2B technology company, they actually, the success of their trust building was when their analytics and research team got pulled in at the concept stage of product development, not at the end to show that things worked or didn't work. Right? We sometimes get pulled too far into the conversation to make a strategic impact, right? So that just the ability of that leader and their team to be pulled in very early into a planning process, a product planning process, that showed that there was trust already between those stakeholders and analytics teams. Like, so this is what I'm talking about in terms of the softer aspects of driving cultural transformation.
From my experience, I I see it in a very similar way, but I organize it in order differently. Where I'd say it's two key factors. One is about being that trusted advisor. And so Shree's talked about the soft skills around being a trusted advisor. And so it is about not just being able to deliver a data-driven recommendation, but also being present. And so I think I would say the key thing. How do you solve a problem? You need to be there at the moment in time that the business is looking for an answer. And
Mhm.
so being present and having presence, I think, is really the first key factor. And secondly, building strong relationships within the organization. Also, people ask other people for advice if they feel that it is a safe person to ask that question, where it could be a controversial answer. And so by being that trusted advisor, then that opens you up to have the opportunity to make a data-driven decision. And so when you make a data-driven decision, you start to have this positive feedback loop. Because you make data-driven decisions, you have a better batting average, a better probability of getting things right, and that in turn reinforces your reputation as a trusted advisor.
Yeah, and one thing you mentioned, Larry, there in terms of the presence, I think there's an element of proactiveness there too, right? You don't wait for delivering those answers. You go to the business with potential things they should be looking at and potential things that can or cannot be solved using analytics, right? So it's sort of that element of proactiveness as well, um, which I think we hear as well, is how and that kind of goes back to the value. If you're reactive, then the business perceives analytics teams to be not as embedded in their roles and their jobs.
Yeah. And analytics, I mean, I remember when I first started in, and our biggest thing was always looking at, okay, what's the impressions, what's the clicks, what's the click-through rate? And that was like the big, wow, we're amazing, But it's been nearly 3 decades of doing this kind of work, and I just wanted to ask you both, how has the field of analytics evolved for both of you? And do you still see things that are the same? What challenges still persist? And in your opinion, what's the greatest opportunity for analytic professionals at any level? Do you see more growth opportunities in industry or fewer?
Yeah, I think one thing that's driving a lot of, it's the interest of the day is AI and machine learning and unstructured data and language AI and all of these things in terms of understanding the context behind how people behave. So it's sort of people and consumers, but it's also patterns, right? It's the intersection. You mentioned impressions and clicks. I think there will always be a need to understand patterns that are very clear in data, but then there are people behind those patterns when you're talking about consumer behavior, right? So how do you introduce other types of interdisciplinary skills, design research skills, ethnography? Like it's small data, it's not big data, but we're seeing there's a need to kind of intersect the qual and the quant a lot more. So I see that as a big opportunity. And certainly I mentioned unstructured data. I think enterprises are sitting on a ton of unstructured data, whether you're a large enterprise with a lot of call center transcripts and things like that, or a small enterprise with document-based textual data. There's a lot you could do with text-based data that are for specific, use cases. So I see kind of the intersection of people understanding and pattern understanding, quant and qual, and then the unstructured data opportunity is probably the big things that are driving some new areas of growth.
And more data is really just meaning right now more data. Just because there's more data available doesn't necessarily mean there's more information available, because it does require an analyst to interpret, translate the data into something that is, dare I use the term, snackable and digestible for an end user to make a decision off of. And so there's still an oversupply of data and an undersupply of people that can interpret and make and present information into something that is actionable, and then further convert that into a business outcome. So I would say that that is still where there is a greater demand that exceeds supply right now. But I will also say that I think there's a lot of fundamentals that every organization and every analytics practitioner should always root themselves and remind themselves of the journey of analytics and the journey of within an organization, because not every organization is ready and is part of an evolution. So the fact is that there are still concepts like around segmentation that date back to the 1950s and catalog segmentation that are still valuable today and are the basis of many segmentations that are being applied. There are, when I think about incrementality as the cutting edge of determining a business outcome, a lot of that is rooted in A/B testing, which has been around for decades. And so I think of what's if I were to summarize, is what's old, what's new is very much what's old and been around for a long time as statistical techniques.
Yeah, and something you said, Larry, about the augmentation. We could actually rely on analytics and AI to augment our own work as analytics professionals, right? I mean, so things like narratives using natural language generation. I know we're a bit away from that at the moment, but there's already BI technologies have NLG baked into them right now, right? To give the analysts, a little bit more of a runway and help them. So we could use analytics for our own work. We could use AI for our own work to augment the work of data analysts and augment the work of, BI users, for instance.
Yeah, and the frameworks themselves are far more flexible right now. Being able to code in Python and R and SQL, which are like the top 3 coding languages, there's a far more robust toolkit for an analyst today than there was even 5 to 7 years ago. And likewise, being able to visualize the information to do more data storytelling, there's far better practices out in the marketplace now than even 10 years ago today. Again, that's where the technology has started to improve, which is then augmenting and actually making the analysts far more impactful because they can actually do more with more data.
Absolutely.
That's great. And we're talking a lot about analysts, but I did have a question about the businesses. I want to know what it means to be an insights-driven business, for example. Like, what is that? Why is that important? And what are some examples of insight-driven businesses that you're familiar with? If you can talk about any of those.
Sure. Yeah, this is a sort of a concept that Forrester introduced at least about maybe 3-4 years ago, where essentially what we're saying is an insights-driven business uses every opportunity to use kind of data and analytics, to improve products and services. It's sort of embedded within every process and every decision. And so the sobering reality of that is that when we do our surveys of data and analytics leaders, only about 7% of data and analytics leaders are actually advanced or say that they're doing advanced practices when it comes to the insights-driven business journey. There is a lot of improvement from beginners to sort of the intermediate stage. People are making foundational investments in a data lake or a machine learning platform. They're making some of the foundational investments, but to get to kind of the advanced level where you are embedding insights within software, you are being proactive about you're scaling insights. You might be great at insights and analytics in the marketing organization or in the sales organization, but how can you scale it across the enterprise? And that's what we consider being good at, being like insights driven is. It's at that enterprise scale where there's much more data sharing. There's more collaboration across these teams when it comes to data and insights. So 7% are advanced. So there's a long way. It's great that, we all will have jobs for the next, 20 years or so in analytics, right? There's a lot of work to be done here in terms of improving on that maturity. And you asked about a couple of examples in our original research. There were these two categories of companies: digital natives who have inherently, baked insights and data into their business models. Think about Airbnb, Netflix, and all of these sort of digital natives. But there are traditional organizations, airlines, and I think we wrote about Alaska Airlines, for instance, right, where they're tracking very operational metrics and understanding how it impacts customer experience, right? So they're closing the loop between metrics and data across business functions, and so it's not just for the digital natives. I mean, any traditional business, an insurance company, a financial services company. We talk at Forrester, we have a lot of financial services clients, insurance. They're doing some pretty cool things with AI and machine learning and trying to essentially build for scale for insights. And that's what we say when we say an insights-driven business. So, it pays off to be an insights-driven business. We see that in our numbers. They're more likely to report higher revenue growth. They're more likely to monetize their data. So there's a lot of upside, but the journey to that is painstaking, right? It's a people story. The tech is always there. I mean, there's always technology, but it's a people story and a transformation story, which is what we're talking about, right? It's the change aspect, which is actually much harder.
I think the insights-driven business is more than just looking at your own internal data within an organization. And we're also seeing where organizations are actually looking outside of their industries to really gain inspiration on best practice. And so I think about a lot of the project management methodologies where, again, agile really being fueled from supply chain management, and Kanban with Toyota. And so moving from manufacturing to thinking about project management, either an agile or scrum basis. And it's really inspiring to see how organizations adapt the best practices from each individual type of industry that's doing really well, and then applying it in a way, not just from an insights and a data perspective, but also process as well. Is there a better way to come up with decisions? Is there a better way to execute decisions where it can be done faster, with more rigor involved, with greater organizational buy-in, and being able to test and learn into various components of it without having to risk large sums of capital.
Absolutely. And I think that the journey you described is sort of that, data awareness, data driven, which is a term that, we have all used at some point, but the insights driven is more about the decisions, right? It's more about those outcomes.
Very good. We're a little bit past halfway through. I was wondering if it should take some questions from the audience, if anyone wanted to put anything in the chat. Let's see anything just as yet. Let's just continue with this discussion. Keep it as loose as possible. Yeah. I'll start with you, Larry. Anything you want to talk about that we haven't covered so far?
I mean, we've covered, I do want to talk about like test and learn, and what's kind of what's old is new, and so I think about the structure of learning, and as an analyst, how do we create lifelong learners so that we have a very strong pipeline of analysts to meet the demand of the insights-driven organization, because you need not just people who are strategic and analytical alongside with your analysts, because you need people to actually understand when you derive an insight, what do you do with it? And so I think what's interesting is being able to bring people to be able to learn faster, to do things faster, and then make a decision that is faster as well.
Yeah, and the one thing is that you mentioned sort of test and learn. I think sometimes analytics and measurement and metrics, they give a false sense of precision to stakeholders, and that's why testing is and learning is like this has to be continuous, right? It's like we never get the answer right the first time. Right, and if you think you did, then actually, chances are you're wrong, right? So I think it is absolutely key, and completely agree with you, Larry, on kind of that discipline of continuous optimization and continuous testing.
Yeah, and it's a journey, just like everything we've talked about, from being being data consumers to being data driven. You have to start someplace. You have you start testing, and then you get into continuous optimization.
Actually, we do have a question from the audience I'd like to share with you. This is from Rick Hamler. So, what strategies have you seen to change the culture and drive skill building in the rest of the organization?
I can take a stab at that. So, over the last year or two, you probably have heard of data literacy initiatives, right? These are defined programs that either are run by the data organizations or the learning and development teams within organizations. These are very specific programs and curriculum in place to up-level the understanding of the use of data, not just for the data team, but other stakeholders. So how do they understand data in their roles? It's sort of like at some point, data and analytics, is like leadership and communication. It's a skill that we all will continue to evolve and have to, learn. And so it's data is a part of everyone's job, not just the data and analytics team. So, what I've seen companies put in place is more structured kind of data literacy initiatives with, again, this might sound cliched, but with that executive buy-in, because there has to be someone accountable for this initiative, right? It could be chief data officers, chief analytics officers, line of business leaders. That accountability with an executive is absolutely crucial for the success of something like this, because then that way you're driving that change with some concrete programs such as this, and then you're checking in whether that worked or not, right? So that would be one example where I could point to, having some sort of a data literacy initiative. I mean, this could mean very different things for different organizations. For some organizations, it might be very foundational concepts in data management, data governance. For some, it might be more data science and machine learning oriented. So this is kind of the broad umbrella of data literacy.
I think I view it as really that it's a multi-layered approach, formal, informal, structured, and unstructured. And so that's, again, we talk about structured, where, again, organizationally, you learn about the metrics, the KPIs within an organization. But unstructured is that every interaction that you have between an analyst and a data consumer is an educational opportunity to walk someone through not just your deliverable, but your process and how you get to an insight. And so it's going to be a combination of all two of those, that 2x2 dimensional matrix of formal and informal, structured and unstructured learning that really elevates an organization from just delivering on bottom line numbers into truly elevating to an insights driven organization.
Great. I have another question from the audience. This one's from Darren. It was once enough to analyze website stats and ad campaign stats downloaded into Excel and manipulated with pivot tables, etc. If you could do pivot tables now, if you could do pivot tables, wow, was his question. Now the analytics, data science, tech has converged with programming. What data science tech is now critical to know, learn, to take above skills to the next level?
I'll start with that. So, so I happen to be an adjunct professor right now as well, during my free time. And I would argue that yes, pivot tables, very important, on knowing how to write Python and maybe SQL or R, it's important. But I would argue that as someone who is training the next generation of analysts, it is really imperative to actually have teach soft skills and critical thinking, because anybody can write a piece of Python script. You can go to GitHub today and find code that's readily available that can answer most business questions. But what isn't being taught is to understand, how should I answer this business question? What is the right piece of code in order to apply to get to this answer? How should I massage the data and understand the data that it makes sense? And then how should I present this back to the organization to get the right response from business stakeholders?
Sri, anything to add?
I would say +1. The technical skills are, there are boot camps and Coursera courses and things like that we could always pick up on the technical skills. It's the stuff that Larry mentioned that's not taught necessarily in school, right? You groom and you pick that over a period of time. Although I will say, if you are looking for a path in the technical realm, then there are some, you will have to get up to speed on some of these core technologies, no code solutions, things like that you will, and an understanding of how they interplay and intersect with other development roles, or a data engineer, or, the production team, how does this role intersect with other types of technology oriented roles? So I do think that there is, if you are oriented more towards the technology path, there's a lot to get up to speed on in terms of, programming languages and just the environment. We even, when Forrester conducts our wave evaluations, we've kind of acknowledged that there are machine learning platforms for code-based environments. There are more UI-based. There are data scientists who don't want to be in a code-based environment. They want to have more of a multimodal type of experience. And then there's a mixture. There's a wide spectrum of analysts and data scientists who want to use technology in a very different way.
That's great. I have a couple more questions from the audience, and thank you everyone in the audience for helping this become a very interactive and collaborative experience. This question is from Tracy. How would you define a data mindset to support data literacy? What specifically does this look like?
I think this is probably going back to something that Larry said. I mean, at the core, it's curiosity and problem solving, right? I mean, data is a means to the end. You could come potentially to the same solution with a very different approach, a problem solving approach. Think about design thinking, different approach to solving problems. So data and analytics is one of the many ways that you can solve very complex kind of business problems that you cannot pinpoint cause and effect very, definitively, right? So I would say I would define a data mindset as a curiosity to acknowledge blind spots of your understanding with any type of analysis, and then how data can plug in and minimize those blind spots.
I'm the +1 on that one. I totally agree there.
Great. Another question from Muna. If you could go back to your younger self, and I love these kinds of questions, what advice would you give to them? And what advice would you share with the younger ones in the organizations in having a successful career in the long run?
So Sri, what happened last year?
What happened last year?
That was a joke around our younger selves.
This is an interesting one. I think breadth comes to mind for me. As analytics, someone starting out in an analytics career, it's very easy to gravitate towards specialization because you feel more confident that these are unique to you and these skills are something that you will be sought out for. But over a period of time, I think building the breadth in communication, leadership, things like that, which are stakeholder management, which sort of serve in the long run. You may not find the need or impact or need for it initially, but just being open to broadening your horizon when it comes to acquiring different types of skills outside of the core technical and analytical oriented skills. So breadth comes to mind for me. Is that would be the advice I would give myself, my younger self, and patience. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. As someone whose career has spanned multiple industries like retail, hospitality, advertising, and now technology, the fact is that I could have never imagined my career path as it was, and so I think it is about it's really about becoming a lifelong learner and just absorbing information as you get to it. I used to joke that to friends of mine that I went to a very technical school and yet graduated without taking a programming class. And here I am, someone who not only has written code, but also teaches others how to code as well. I would have laughed as at my older self. And so I think it's really more about really appreciating and understanding that you don't know what you don't know, and being open to the world and absorbing it.
That's great. Thank you both. We have another question. Love it. What about the role of business leaders in creating an insights-driven organization?
I mean, this is the core. There was a time when IT had a lot of the responsibility for data and analytics, right? And now this organization around data and analytics that probably sits at the intersection of IT and business, that has emerged. But the pendulum, is swinging stronger and stronger towards the business leaders, right? Because that is where the responsibilities of metrics and goals, that's where it lies. You are driving loyalty improvement, retention, you're driving acquisition, you're driving very concrete goals. And the closer the data analytics leaders are to the business leaders, it's going to serve them more. And we even see this in our chief data officer research. CDOs who are as a part of a business organization, either they report into CMOs or they report into line of business leaders, there's a much more chance of them creating more impact in their roles than if they are kind of removed from the business. They have to be at that sort of intersection or even very closely aligned to business functions.
I totally agree. I'd say that the pendulum started with Moneyball, and where every CEO wants to be Billy Bean. They see themselves as being able to get the competitive edge using data and being an insights driven organization. And so as the business has now created that new icon of being Billy Bean and Moneyball, the business organizations have now migrated and become more analytical, or strive to become more analytical, where before it was limited to the technology organizations. Now everyone, that's now being fully integrated, where marketers need to be data fluent in order to be effective. Salespeople need to be data oriented to be effective, and certainly CEOs need to be masters of their metrics.
Great. I think I'm going to have one more question for you both, if that's okay. Mm-hmm. So this one is, what do you see for the future of analytics? Types of skills, technologies, 5 years, 10 years? Just, and it's funny because we haven't really touched, like, for example, the importance of analytics in healthcare or like this global crisis we've just gone through. Just wanted to get your input on those subjects.
I think one thing that comes to mind for me in the future is we've always had businesses have always had the pressure of doing more with less. And I think I think just given the environment that we've had in the last 2 years, that has become front and center, right? How do you create more efficiencies, more value, more impact with whatever resources that you have, whether that's hiring. I mean, we're all seeing the great resignation trend. There's a talent crunch out there, right? So in terms of the what it means for the future of analytics is that the investments that we're making in analytics have to do a lot more than they did in the past. And I think that comes with the point I was making earlier about augmentation. How do you apply analytics to augment existing roles and make current analysts and data scientists more productive in their roles, versus kind of going after acquiring new, and building bigger teams, right? Like, how do you make your existing employees more productive and more in tune with kind of the outcomes of the business that they're seeking. So one aspect is sort of like doing more with less, which I think we'll see more of, especially when it comes to the world of analytics. But I'll let Larry chime in as well.
Yeah, I mean, the pandemic has shown that what were barriers don't necessarily need to be barriers. You can have a virtual team and a virtual organization and continue to function as an organization on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis. So location is no longer a barrier to be part of a connected organization. Likewise, even thinking about, the development of vaccine, where vaccines usually are a multi-generational type of development, where again, now with the development of our mRNA vaccines and the ability to post that to the internet, development time was shortcutted by years. And so it's really exciting where a lot of the boundaries that were in place in conducting a fluid organization, a fluid business, is truly allowing organizations to be anywhere, work across any time zone for any client in any industry, and solve whatever business problems are needed.
That's great. So we have about 5 minutes left. I wanted to, first, thank you both for taking the time to come on to this fireside chat. I also wanted to thank all the participants that have chimed in. Well, everyone that's signed on, and definitely everyone that's chimed in with questions. That was really great and to help move this conversation along. Also want to thank Decision Foundry and Forrester. But I do want to end with some closing statements from both of you on just a wrap up of the meeting, a wrap up of the importance of data, the importance of analytics, becoming a change agent, mastering that, and what you feel.
Yeah, I'll go in first. So, I mean, kind of circling back on this concept of change agent, right? I think there's the focus and energy that analytics and data professionals put into kind of getting good at technology. I think now, think about sort of making different types of friends, your HR leaders, your CFOs, everybody needs a piece of your work, and everybody needs a piece of your expertise. So I think the way that you share that expertise and the way that you communicate that expertise to a wide range of stakeholders, I think that's really exciting for analytics and data professionals to, not be in the back room and actually come closer to boardrooms and drive that conversation at a strategic level. And so, who knows, maybe the next CEOs of the next generation in the next 10 years are going to be very data focused CEOs and very analytics focused CEOs, and CDOs could become the next CEOs of their companies, right? So it's sort of like trying to be at the tip of the spear versus in the background. And I think that's the big opportunity that I see as a wrap up here.
I do see the convergence as well, where the data practitioners are needing to become more strategic and more communicative and contextual in their delivery of their findings. And so likewise, you have business leaders that are becoming more analytical in nature because they need data and to be able to interpret data in their own way in order to feed their business decisions as well. And so I do see the lines being blurred, which I think is a good thing. Because again, I think everyone is eventually going to be on the same page, using the same language, using the same syntax of what does it mean to move the business from where they are today to where they need to be tomorrow. And so it's going to take both the data practitioners and the business working together, translating everything together in order to change their organizations in a way that makes them last for the long run.
Great. Thank you both for that. And we're about 2 minutes out. I could throw up. Let's put this in a little gallery mode. So thank you both for your time. Thank you, everyone, all the participants for joining in. And I hope this was informative for everyone that participated. And I hope that you both had a great time doing this fireside chat.
Absolutely. Thanks, James. Thanks, Larry.
Thank you, James. Thanks, Sri.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. And I'll close out the meeting now. See you, Larry.